Okay, I'm going to get started this morning by just welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung. Nice to see all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone joining us online as well. Today is our group learning program where each Sunday I get together with students, guiding you in a meditation session, and then I'll share a talk with you from this book. The book is titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Today we're in chapter 16, which is titled Dissolving the Ego. Ego serves no purpose. You're going to be able to understand what the ego is and how to actually eliminate it. Because as long as the mind has an ego, the mind isn't going to be able to experience enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It no longer experiences any discontent feelings. The mind has been trained to the point where it only experiences peace and joy. There's no longer any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these feelings and others are eliminated from the mind. You'll have personal, professional relationships that are really blossoming and at ease. But as long as there's ego in the mind, you're not going to be able to have comfortable relationships or harmonious relationships. Because when your ego is coming up, people will tend to push you aside. So I'll teach you all about this. I'll explain to you what the ego is, the problems that you're going to encounter because of it. And then I'm going to teach you how to actually eliminate it and eliminate it from the mind so that you can experience the peace and the joy along with other things you would need to do to be able to get to enlightenment as well. But this is one aspect of getting to enlightenment is eliminating the ego. So if you'd like to join for meditation, the way that I start is I start with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. And these chants are on a laminated sheet over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself and get one. They're in the Pali language. Yeah, go ahead, help yourself. They're in the Pali language, and it has the English translations on there as well. For those of you guys that are online, if you would like to get access to this chanting sheet, you can go to buddhadailywisdom.com and you can click on free books, and down towards the bottom, you'll be able to see the chanting sheet that we're doing the chants with. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory, that every 2 weeks his students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. This is how they were able to learn the teachings and commit them to their memory, because the technology to write things down didn't exist in that region of the world, so they needed a way to remember the teachings, and it was chanting that they used in order to remember the teachings. So there isn't anything mystical or magical with these chants. It's not a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship. It's not prayer or anything like that. The Buddha didn't actually teach those kinds of things. If you see those kinds of things associated with the Buddha's teachings, he didn't actually teach them. He actually taught you to train your mind and uproot certain pollutions that are in your mind. And by uprooting these pollutions, that's what's going to produce the enlightened mental state. I still chant in order to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. If you read the English translations, you'll see that there's a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of this, I don't think the Buddha actually even created these chants. They were probably created by his students, either during his life or after his death, because a Buddha doesn't walk around and say, here, chant these things to me, because that would be ego. That would be arrogance. And in order to get to enlightenment, you need to eliminate the ego and the arrogance and the boastfulness. So the Buddha wouldn't have created these. But if you learned from a teacher how to move from the anger and the sadness and the guilt and the shame and fear and all these other discontent feelings, and you were able to move to this enlightened mental state where the mind's peaceful and joyful permanently, and this teacher didn't want anything from you or expect anything from you, you would probably have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. So that's where I suspect that these chants actually came from. So we'll be chanting these to ease us into the meditation, and you're welcome to chant along if you like. Once we're in the meditation, I'll be providing some guidance. It's like instructions of guiding you how to meditate while we're actually meditating. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating together. Everyone here at the temple and anyone joining us online will just all be meditating together at the same time. Then we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting. I'm sure during that period of time where it's just quiet and we're meditating together, you guys will hear certain sounds, because you can't be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. But the mind, what it'll do in the unenlightened state is it'll crave permanence. It wants things to be a certain way permanently. So if your mind craves and longs and yearns, wanting quietness during your meditation, when you hear even the slightest sound, your mind will be annoyed. But that's your mind causing that annoyment itself. So you'll probably hear a car go by, you might hear a dog barking, a bird chirping, or any of these other kinds of things. And you can just understand that all these sounds are impermanent. And as long as your mind isn't craving permanent silence, which is impossible, then your mind can actually be completely peaceful and joyful even when you hear these sounds. In terms of your body positioning for meditation, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught. He taught seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you might use these at different times during your journey to enlightenment. You're going to need to learn them because you can't meditate in the exact same position all the time. But oftentimes students are learning in the seated position. So I'll help you guys to understand the seated position. But just keep in mind that what I share with you, it's not a requirement. It's not that everybody's going to sit in exactly the same way, because that would be permanence, and we understand the world is full of impermanence. So the things that I share with you are just suggestions to be able to help you to maybe find something that's more comfortable for you. So if you're on the floor, you might sit with some cushions under your rear. This makes your seat a bit more soft. And then if you're going to cross your legs, you like them to just be lightly crossed. Whereas if they're real tight, it can impede the circulation and cause difficulties with the blood flow and cause pain. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets their hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. And once again, it allows the circulation to flow. So that might be something that you consider. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. But again, it's not about everyone doing it the same way, because it's not possible. All of our bodies are different, and we'll find different things to be comfortable. So there's other options here. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people like to put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you can find whatever's comfortable for you out of all those options. And there might be something else that you find. So it's not about training the body, it's about training the mind. This is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're going to be eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from your mind, and you're going to be cultivating certain wholesome qualities. So as long as the body's comfortable, that's what's important. As long as it's not luxurious, where the mind will have a tendency to be complacent, and the body's not painful, then if the body's comfortable, you'll be able to actively train the mind. In terms of those of you guys that are in chairs, or maybe if you're at home, you're on a bench or a sofa or in a wheelchair or something like this, you can also sit however you're comfortable. Some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles, but you can see me, I'm sitting in a chair with my legs crossed. So this is an option for you as well. You could sit however you're comfortable. And then the same thing with the hands and arms. You can put those wherever you're comfortable. The upper body is nice if it's erect with the sternum up and the shoulders back, because it'll keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. That's what's going to help you to be able to eliminate unwholesome qualities and cultivate certain wholesome qualities when the mind is attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be erect with the sternum up and the shoulders back. Not only will it help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, but it'll also make it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with some chanting. You guys are welcome to join along, and then I'm going to come back in with the guidance to help you during the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Potang Mahakavanang Apivatemi Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตูอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, Cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Photang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusrang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you. Nice to see everyone here this morning. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to everyone online as well. This is called breathing mindfulness meditation. This is a primary form of training that the Buddha used in terms of meditation in order to make his way to enlightenment. There's other things besides meditation that you would need to know and practice in order to make your way to enlightenment, but this is a primary form of training using the breathing mindfulness meditation. What it's doing is it's exercising your mind, helping you to cultivate certain qualities. You're cultivating mindfulness or awareness of mind and concentration. These are very important in your day-to-day life to have awareness of what's going on in your own mind. If you don't have awareness of the thoughts and ideas and certain wholesome qualities that are in your mind and unwholesome qualities that are in your mind, you wouldn't actually be able to make your way to enlightenment. So you're going to need to cultivate this awareness of what's going on in the mind. And the meditation is one way to do that. And then you need to practice awareness of mind or mindfulness all throughout your day, as well as concentration, doing just one thing at a time. Sometimes what we do in day-to-day life in the unenlightened state is we rapidly cycle from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. You're not actually doing all these things at one time. Someone might have taught you to multitask. Your mind actually can't do multiple things at one time. You can only do one thing at a time. But instead, what the mind does is it rapidly cycles from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And if you're doing this at work all day long, you probably get home and you find it hard to actually relax. You might have stress or anxiety. It's kind of like a racehorse running around a track constantly. When it goes to the barn, it can't calm down because it's been running around the track for a certain period of time. It's the same thing with your mind. If you do that with your mind throughout your day, where you're bouncing around from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, you're going to find it very challenging to relax and eliminate your stress and anxiety. So this meditation is helping you to get that awareness of mind and that focus or concentration. It's also training your mind to let go, let go, let go. The goal isn't to train your mind to eliminate your thoughts. Sometimes people think that that's the case. But even when you're enlightened, you're going to have thoughts during meditation. But the difference is that an unenlightened being, they're going to have rapid thoughts. They're going to have a whole lot of thoughts during their meditation, and they're going to be constantly trying to cut those off. Or they might indulge in a thought, follow that for a period of time, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm meditating. Let me bring my mind back to the breath, right? But an enlightened being, they'll have a thought, they'll notice it, and they'll cut it off. And then there's going to be this period of time where the mind is quieted and stilled. And this is kind of like maybe 30 seconds or a minute in between thoughts where the mind is quieted and stilled and completely peaceful and joyful all the way through. So you're going to have thoughts during your meditation, but anything that comes up, you would like to cut it off. And this is training your mind to let go. Because the reason why you're getting angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed or any of these other discontent feelings is your mind's holding on. You're wanting things to be a certain way. And if you get things your way, you get happy or excited. But when you don't get things your way, you get angry or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. And you can look at your life and you can see this to be the case. You shouldn't believe any of the teachings of the Buddha. Don't believe me. Don't believe what I write in books. Don't believe anything. Instead, look at it yourself. Look at your own life and look at situations where you've been angry or frustrated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling. And you can see that there was something your mind wanted. And if you would have got what you wanted, you would have been happy or excited. But because you didn't get what you wanted, your mind got angry or frustrated. And because you live in an impermanent world, you're not going to always get what you want. There's going to be some situations where you do get what you're looking to acquire, but then in other situations, you're not going to be able to do that. So if you can only be happy when you get what you want, you can't be happy permanently. And what the Buddha is teaching you to do is how to get to permanent happiness, permanent joy, where you can be enjoying all aspects of your life and your mind's not going up and down and up and down. Because when your mind's doing that, up and down, you'll attribute your painful feelings to something external. You might think your parents are causing you to be angry, or you might think your brothers and sisters are annoying you, or you might think your coworkers are frustrating you, or things like this. But this is not actually the truth. What's happening is your own mind is craving and longing, yearning, expecting these people to do things a certain way. And when they do things your way, you get happy, but when they don't do things your way, you get frustrated or angry or irritated. So as long as you have all these conditions in your mind, all these expectations and all these wants, the amount of happiness that you have becomes less and less and less and less. This is why some people, when they get old, they're old and grumpy. But you don't have to be old and grumpy. You can be old and happy. You can be old and joyful. But if you have all these cravings, desires, all these things you want other people to do, you'll be old and grumpy and irritable. So you can erase all of that. You can get to the point where your mind has been well trained and you can be peaceful and joyful permanently all the way through every single moment. There's nothing that can shake up your mind. Even if your mother died, for example, you could still maintain your peace and your joy. Oftentimes people think it's love that's causing their mind to be sad or sorrowful or grieve when their family members are dying or passing away, but it's not actually your love. It's the craving for permanence. The mind wants mom and dad or grandma and grandpa to be permanent, and they're just not permanent. Everything around you is impermanent. It's going to arise, change, and fade away. So when the mind lacks wisdom of what I'm describing to you, that your own mind is causing these feelings, you'll tend to attribute these things to something external. And when you're experiencing that, you might push people away. You might have done that in your life, where you've pushed friends away or you've pushed family members away, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. But you can see it hasn't solved the problem because you still get frustrated. You still get annoyed. If they were the real cause of your problem, when you push them away, you'd be peaceful for the rest of your life, but you're not. Right? The other thing you'll do when you lack wisdom that your own mind is causing these feelings is you'll be bitter and harsh and hostile towards people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. It's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another individual. And the mind thinks if I can fear this person into doing things my way, then I'll get what I want. I'll get those cravings fulfilled and I'll be so happy, right? But being bitter, harsh, and hostile to people is just damaging your relationships. Or you might put your expectations on people, where you might try to control people and kind of force them, attempting to force them to do things your way. And as long as you're doing that, you can't live harmoniously with other beings. So with the mind's lack of wisdom, thinking that the feelings that you are experiencing are coming from something external, you'll keep experiencing broken relationship after broken relationship after broken relationship, because you'll push people away, you'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile, or you'll put your expectations on people, and your relationships will continue to turn over and over and over and over again, because it's only a matter of time before that person you're with does something that you disagree with. And now you'll push them away, you'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile, or you'll put your expectations on them. And if you can only be with people who do things your way, there's only one person that you can be with in the world. That's yourself, because nobody else is going to do things your way except you. There's more than one right way to do things in the world. But with the mind's ego, what I'm going to teach you guys today, with the mind's ego, what I'm going to teach you guys today, the mind will think that my way is the right way and everybody else is doing it the wrong way. And if they just do it my way, everything will be wonderful, right? So this ego that I'm going to share with you, it really gets into your way of having harmonious relationships, because the mind will go around with this arrogance and this pride, this boastfulness, putting yourself above people or below people. Where the ego is coming from is our animal existences. When we were in the animal world, we needed ego. We needed this to be able to know this pecking order in our society. When we were a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male and who's the alpha female, because they're teaching us how to hunt. They're teaching us how to survive. They're teaching us how to be better wolves so that our pack can survive. When we were in a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd, because she's the one who knows where the migration paths are. She knows where the food is. She knows where the watering holes are. If we didn't know who was above us and who the matriarch of our herd was, we wouldn't have survived. So we needed to know who was above us and who was below us. We needed this pecking order in the animal world. But coming into the human world, our mind retains that pecking order. We're looking in a social situation, who's above us and who's below us. And because of this, it hinders you from being able to have harmonious relationships, because the mind might talk down to people who you think are below you. And then when there's people that you perceive as being above you, your mind might be shaken up, maybe like a boss, or maybe a celebrity or a politician. You come in contact with this person, you think they're above you, and now you're all shaken up and your mind's uncalm around this person, and you find it difficult to perform maybe in your professional career. But you can get rid of this ego and get to the point where you just look at everybody as being equal, and your mind can be humble. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to explain to you what this ego is so that you can understand it, and then we're going to go in and I'm going to explain to you how to actually eliminate it from the mind, because when you eliminate this ego, you'll be able to reside peaceful and harmonious in a lot of these situations where your mind would otherwise be judging others and looking down on others, or looking up to people in such awe, because this is actually harming your own mind. When you're judging other people and you're looking at them as being below you or above you, it's actually harming your own mind, and it's harming your ability to have successful relationships. So what the ego is, it is a collection of experiences from the past and your future expectations of yourself. You'll put certain expectations on yourself, judging yourself of who you think you are. The ego is an accumulation of thoughts, ideas, and perceptions. What perceptions are your views and opinions about the world. Your ego accumulates these thoughts, ideas, and perceptions about your certain self-image and how you want to be perceived in the world by others, and a certain self-identity that's in your mind. The ego will contain arrogance and pride, judgment, measuring and comparing yourself as being superior or inferior towards others. The mind will be boastful, prideful, and arrogant towards others. During the lifetime of the Buddha, this word ego didn't actually exist. So when the Buddha talks about what we refer to as the ego, he actually talks about it as two separate things. And it's actually helpful to understand it as these two separate things, because there's actually different symptoms associated with these, and there's different solutions of how to fix them. So I'm going to explain to you the way that the Buddha talks about this, and then we'll combine it and you'll be able to see how this is what we're referring to as the ego. So in the teachings of the Buddha, there's 10 individual pollutions that he discovered in the unenlightened mind, and he provides you the tools and the techniques of how to eradicate these and uproot them out of the mind. And when you do so, that's where your mind will actually be experiencing enlightenment. And as you're gradually diminishing these pollutions, you'll gradually see the condition of the mind gradually improving. And you'll see that the condition of your life is gradually improving. It's kind of like the sun has clouds in front of it. And when you start peeling away the clouds, the rays of the sun start shining through more and more and more. This is the same thing as when you start eliminating these pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind, you'll start seeing better and better qualities of the mind performing. So these 10 individual pollutions or defilements or taints that the Buddha describes, they're referred to as the 10 fetters. They're referred to as a fetter because during ancient times, they would attach a shackle and a chain and a ball around your ankle if you were a prisoner or they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area. This was called a fetter, that they would attach a fetter to your ankle and they would keep you in an open field. Where today we put prisoners in jail cells or prison cells or things like that, during ancient times, they would put a shackle and a chain and a ball around your ankle and you would just stay in this open field and then everybody would know where you're at because you can't go running off somewhere, right? So when the Buddha discovers these 10 pollutions, he calls them fetters because these 10 fetters are keeping your mind trapped and confined in the unenlightened state. It's continuing to experience frustration and agitation, annoyance, difficulties and struggles in the world, broken relationships over and over and over again. You experience guilt and shame and fear and stress and anxiety and all of these things because of these fetters that are in the mind. So what the path to enlightenment is it's a purification of the mind where you're applying tools and techniques to purify the mind of these 10 fetters. And as you do, that's where you'll see the qualities of enlightenment start to shine through slowly but surely as you're gradually diminishing these fetters. So there's a core central teaching called the Eightfold Path that the Buddha teaches you, that's where you really get started on the path to enlightenment. If you've never studied the teachings of the Buddha before, that's the best place to start. And you would like to use the original words of the Buddha, which this book series that I share actually has the original words for you to be able to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. And it's available for you at no cost. You can download it for free from our website. You can take it and go print it if you like. You can get printed versions here by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can order it on Amazon if your country has access to Amazon. In that particular book, chapter 4 and 5 is the Eightfold Path, and I teach these at different times. So there's been videos and podcasts and things like this. There's even an audiobook. All this stuff is available to you at no cost. Even personal guidance. You can receive personal guidance. So you're going to need to know the Eightfold Path in order to be able to start really purifying the mind of these 10 fetters. But what you start to learn is you start to learn these fetters of personal existence view and conceit. This is what we're referring to as the ego. What this pollution of personal existence view is, this is the first fetter. This is where the mind holds on and clings to a self-image or a self-identity or a self-identity in the mind. The mind's clinging to the body. It's clinging to the mind, and it's wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. So for example, if you've ever spilled like spaghetti sauce or chocolate ice cream on your clothing in a social situation and you were embarrassed, this is your personal existence view. The mind is confused. It's misunderstanding. It thinks that this body is you, and now the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And when you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived, you'll be happy or excited or elated. But when you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived, the mind will be frustrated or agitated or annoyed, or in this example, embarrassed. Or say that maybe you looked in the mirror and you saw a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or a gray hair, or you started losing your hair. This is your personal existence view. If your mind was shaken up during that period of time and you were like, oh my goodness, a wrinkle, oh, a mole, oh, a gray hair, oh, I'm losing my hair, oh, I'm getting a little extra fat. This is the mind holding on to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And as long as you're being perceived the way you want to be perceived, you'll have that happiness. But if you aren't being perceived the way you want to be perceived, the mind will be frustrated or agitated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling. Some more about the self-image that you might be doing. I did this when I was a teenager growing up. Before I went to school, I'd be in the mirror with some mousse and some gel, and I'd be running it through my hair, trying to get every little hair in exactly the right spot. And I couldn't go outside until I got every single hair in the right spot, right? And sometimes I was late for school. I would miss the bus. I did this so much, right? This is the personal existence view, not feeling comfortable to go out in the world unless this body is looking a certain way. If you've ever stood in front of your closet and thinking, who am I going to see today, and how do I want to appear? What clothing do I want to pick in order to look that particular way when I go around those people? That's your personal existence view, where your mind's trying to be perceived by others in a certain way. You might even put on clothes and jewelry and things like this and looked in the mirror and you're like, nah, that's not how I want to look. And now you go and you change your clothes again and you come back and you're like, nah, that's not how I want to look. And you go get another set of clothes and you're like, okay, that's it. That's the way I want to look. Right? This is your personal existence view, where the mind is confused. It's having misunderstanding. It wants to be perceived in the world a certain way. And then there's a certain self-identity in the mind that the mind is clinging to. This can be about your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. You might be clinging to this I am, like I am Chinese, or I am an Aussie, or I am a Brit, or I am, I don't know, any number of things. I am an electrician. I am a construction worker. I am a taxi driver. Any number of I am around your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. You can be clinging to this as your identity. Maybe I am a boyfriend. I am a girlfriend. I am a husband. I am a wife. So if you were in a relationship and you broke up in your relationship, maybe when you were together, you identified with I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend. But then when you guys broke up and now you're single, your mind didn't identify that way. So you might have thought the way to solve this problem is to hurry up and get right back into another relationship. And your mind thought that that's what was going to solve this uncomfortableness. When you were together with the person and you could identify with I am a boyfriend or I'm a girlfriend, you felt pretty content. But then when you were out of that relationship and you're now single, the mind was uncomfortable with that. And it might have felt like you needed to hurry up and get right back into another relationship. And this is what was going to solve it. But that's not what was going to solve it, because the underlying problem is this personal existence view, where the mind's clinging to a certain identity, thinking that this is who you are. Or say you identify with like I am American, or I am Chinese, or I am Estonian, or I am German, or any of this other I am. Maybe you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, people are talking positively about the people from where you come from and what your identity is. They say all Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. I've never heard that before, but that could be the case, right? Somebody might say that. And if they said that, and if you identify with I'm American, you might be like, all right, yeah, they're talking about me. Okay, right? But now 2 tables over at the restaurant, they start talking in degrading and disparaging and diminishing ways about the people from where you come from. Well, if you identify with that as who you are, you're going to think they're talking about me, and now you might be ready to fight, right? So this identity that the mind holds on to, they can hold on to any number of things. Let's just say that you're a police officer and you identify with I am a police officer. And now 10 or 15 years into your career, maybe you get injured. Maybe you get fired. Maybe you retire. Or now maybe you're like a taxi driver and your mind doesn't identify with I am a taxi driver. It identifies with I am a police officer. And now you really struggle because you're doing this work as a taxi driver and the mind's thinking the whole time, I am a police officer. I am a police officer. I am a police officer. And it really struggles during this period of time. So you can hold on to any number of things. One time I had a student contact me because they were interested in personal guidance, and they said, David, I'm having a really hard time since COVID. I said, yeah, what's going on? I say, every time I go into a restaurant, they show me the computer screen so that I can pay because they don't accept cash anymore. It's contactless payment. And the computer screen accepts my payment, but it's also asking for a tip. And all I did is went in and I ordered a cup of coffee. I spent 30 seconds ordering the cup of coffee and they want like a 25, 28, 30% tip. And I don't think I should have to tip in that situation. I am a good tipper, but I feel uncomfortable in this situation. I just don't understand. I am a good tipper. I'm a good tipper, but when I tip, when I don't tip, I feel so uncomfortable. I said, well, that's your personal existence view. Your mind is clinging to this, I am a good tipper. And now when you're in a situation where you're not tipping, your mind feels uncomfortable. You've got to get rid of that personal existence view and not identify with I am a good tipper through your mind. So this personal existence view is where the mind is clinging to the self-image or the self-identity thinking that this is who you are. And there's a solution for this. If you studied with me the universal truth of impermanence, discontentedness, and the universal truth of non-self, these are 3 universal truths that you study when you're first getting started on the path. The universal truth of non-self, the Buddha is helping you to understand that there is no self. There is no you. But the mind is going to cling to this body, and it's going to cling to this mind thinking that this is who you are. So there is a body that is in existence, and there is a mind that is in existence, and it has come together for this existence. But this isn't you. This isn't who you are as a person. And as long as you cling to this and hold on to this, thinking that this is who you are, then you will struggle and you will have difficulties. So as you heard me share, there's nothing in the teachings of the Buddha that you would believe. You can hear some of the examples that I'm giving you. You're probably like, yep, I did that. Yep, I did that. Yep, I did that. This is helping you to verify that you have this personal existence view in your mind. And the solution that the Buddha gives you is that there is no self, right? And you can independently verify this by thinking about yourself when you were a child, when you were a teenager, early adulthood, and then now. Think about yourself. Did you view yourself in exactly all the same ways and all those same phases of your life or different phases of your life? Did you view yourself exactly the same way, or has it been constantly changing? Well, it's been constantly changing. You viewed yourself in terms of your personality and your character one way when you were a child, a different way when you were a teenager, a different way in early adulthood, and then maybe now. You can think about this as if your arm is amputated and you only have one hand and one arm. Ask yourself, are you less of a person because you only have one hand and one arm? Most people say no, they're not less of a person, right? If this body was you, then when I ask you if your arm is amputated and you only have one hand and one arm, are you less of a person? You would say, yes, I'm less of a person because there's less body, so therefore I'm less of a person. But intellectually sitting here, you can think about this and you can say, no, I'm not less of a person. So intellectually, you know that this body is not you. Otherwise, you would answer that question differently. But the mind's confusion, the mind's misunderstanding, if someone says something negative about this body, you'll get angry, you'll get frustrated, right? That's the personal existence view kicking in, the confusion, the misunderstanding, the misperception. Or you can ask yourself, like, point to yourself. Where are you? Right? Sometimes people point, right? Or they point here. So if you're pointing here and you think that this is where you are, you need to look at what you're pointing to, which is a shirt. And you can ask yourself, is that who you are? That shirt that you're wearing, is that you? Is that shirt you? Most people say, no, that's not you. So, okay, let's throw away the shirt. All right, so where are you? And someone might point again. Well, what are we pointing to? We're pointing to skin. So if we took off the skin and we held it up, is that you? That skin you got? Is that who you are? That skin? Well, of course not. That's not you, right? So let's throw that away. Where are you? And someone might point again. Well, we've got bones, we've got muscle tissue, we've got organs and fluid and things like this. None of those bits and pieces and parts are you. But the mind, with its personal existence view, its confusion, its misunderstanding, it will cling to this body, thinking that this is who you are. And that's where you'll have difficulties and struggles. And this is part of the ego, because the mind has a certain arrogance, a certain pride, a certain boastfulness, clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you feel good when you're being perceived that way. But when you're not being perceived that way, you feel diminished and you feel less of a person. And now when you go out into the world, you can't function in a harmonious way with all people around you. So this personal existence view is one aspect of the ego. And I'm going to explain to you how to eliminate it from the mind through various techniques to be able to do that. But first, I need to make sure you understand what it is. The second one here is called conceit. This is the 8th fetter out of the 10 fetters. Remember those pollutions of the mind. What conceit is this is the arrogance, the pride, the measuring and comparing, looking at other people and considering yourself to be superior to them or inferior, putting yourself above them and looking down, or putting yourself below people and looking up to them with such awe and admiration that your mind is shaken up. So in this situation, you can't live harmoniously with all people, because you'll go to a social situation and your mind's trying to figure out the pecking order of who are you above and who are you below, because you need to speak to one group of people in one way, you need to speak down to them, and then the other people who you look at as being above you, you need to speak up to them. And now the mind's constantly trying to figure this out, and your mind's almost short-circuiting in a certain public situation where you have to speak differently to different people. But what you would like to get to is a situation where you can just speak to everybody the same. Your mind doesn't have to be overloaded with that burden of having to figure out who to speak to in one way and who to speak to in another way. You can just speak to everybody in the same way, being polite, kind, friendly, respectful with everybody. So while we have different roles in society, there's a king of Thailand, but there's also someone outside on the street who sweeps the street. These people aren't higher or lower than each other. They just have different roles in society, and they have a different lifestyle. Right? Some people might look at one person as being above and one person as being below, but your mind doesn't have to do that. You can look at everybody as equal. If you see the king of Thailand walking down the street, you might say, "Hello, sir, how are you?" Or you see the queen, "Hello, ma'am, how are you?" And you might why them. But also when you see the person sweeping the street, you can say, "Hello, sir, how are you?" "Hello, ma'am, how are you?" Right? You can be just as respectful to that person as you would be to the king or the queen, right? No need to be super respectful to the king and the queen because you want something from them. And there's no reason to be degrading and disrespectful to the person who's sweeping the street because you don't want anything from them. Instead, these people are all performing a certain role in society, and it's important. We like to have a king who's functioning well and who's looking out for the country, but we also like to have clean streets as well. And we like that person to be able to sweep the streets. And if that's what they enjoy doing, then wonderful. That's what they've chosen for their life, right? But for us within our own mind, we need to see everybody as equal, including ourselves, that we're equal to everybody. Because once we start putting ourselves above people and below people, we can't relate to people harmoniously in a loving and warm and gentle and kind way. Our loving kindness, our genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, it can't shine through. And we can't practice being loving and kind with people when our ego is in the way and we're trying to judge people as being above us or below us. We can't be loving and kind to all people because there's this judgment in the mind judging other people. Not only do you might judge people putting yourself above them or below them, but what this ego also does is it tries to determine what is wholesome or unwholesome for other people. You might think that you know what's right for other people, and you might even try to step into their life and tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing. Maybe your parents or your siblings or your coworkers, you might try to tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing in their life. But because we don't know everybody's life and we don't know what they're facing and we don't know all the variables that they're facing, we can't know what is 100% right for other people. It's just not possible. You understand what's going on in your life and making certain decisions in your life, but you can't make decisions for other people. And as soon as you think that you know something better than somebody else and you would like to step in and try to fix what is going on in their life, that's your ego taking on, where you think that you know better than them. So this conceit is the arrogance, the pride, the measuring and comparing, putting yourself above people or below people. And this is just going to hinder you from having harmonious relationships where you see everybody as being equal. And we're combining these two things and we're calling it the ego. Where typically when we talk about the ego, we think about conceit, but there's this personal existence view that's part of the ego too. So I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have any questions on what personal existence view is, or conceit is, and what the ego is. Now we're combining this together. And then I'm going to move on from here, and I'm going to give you some more details of how this is causing you difficulties and struggles. And then I'm going to teach you how to eliminate it. So if you guys have questions here that you would like to ask about these, if here at the temple, if you could use the microphones in the white bowl right there in the center of the floor, just get a microphone, press the gray button. There's lights that come on. You can hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online. And then if you'd like to keep the microphone with you, that'd be fine, because other people might have a question around you, or you might have more than one question yourself. And then if when you're done, you could turn it off. That'll make sure we don't get feedback from the speakers. And then for anyone who's online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically, and I'll see that, and you can ask your questions. So does anybody here or online have any questions? Looks like you have a question. Yeah, get a microphone.
So my question is, you said something like we shouldn't care about what other people think about us. And for example, if we got spaghetti sauce on our shirt, we shouldn't be embarrassed. Am I understanding you correctly?
I didn't say you shouldn't care, but what I shared was that the reason why the mind is experiencing that embarrassment is because of its personal existence view. So caring about something is different than getting discontent because of it. The embarrassment is what's called a discontent feeling. It's a conditioned feeling that the mind is experiencing a certain feeling based on a condition. If this clothes are all white, the conditioned feeling might be happiness or excitement. But if you have spaghetti sauce on your clothing, now that conditioned feeling is embarrassment or frustration or something like this. This is the mind going up and down and up and down. This is what the unenlightened mind experiences, is experiencing conditioned feelings. What you would like to get to is if you spilled spaghetti sauce on your clothing, it's like, spaghetti sauce. Okay, well, that's unfortunate. It looks like I got some spaghetti sauce on my clothes. Maybe I'll try to get that off, but you're not worried about it. You're not feeling anxiety or stress or embarrassed or anything like that. But you can still take action to get that spaghetti sauce off, but you're just not frustrated or embarrassed or anything like that.
Okay, I think I'm understanding it a little bit better. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also another question is that you just talked about something that has to do with like self-image. For example, if I'm here, I'm Chinese, and I meet a Chinese friend, and people say we're good, we're friendly, or whatever, we feel proud or something, and we identify ourselves with a certain group of people, and I don't understand why that's a problem.
So when you have pride, this is the mind being puffed up. Like, I'm proud of who I am and what I'm doing. This is the mind attempting to put itself above people. This is
why I'm just proud of who I am. Doesn't mean I look down on other people.
What pride is that I've got something that you don't have, and now I'm proud of that.
But you can be proud of who you are. We can all be proud of who we are, right?
And that's what's leading to difficulties and struggles. So you can accomplish certain things in the world for your own needs and your own development of maybe your career or something like that. But as soon as you take pride in it, it's like, look, I've got this degree. I've got a master's degree, a PhD, and you don't. And I'm going to be proud of what I've done. Instead, you can just make wise decisions to humbly pursue these things because you know it's in your best interest to be able to accomplish certain things, to be able to move your career forward. But what the mind's looking for is it's looking for those pleasant feelings, conditional pleasant feelings. That I went through this 4-year, 6-year, 8-year program. I got this certificate. I can now hang it on the wall, and I'm more important than other people who come into my office. And now look at me. I'm so great because because I've got this degree. Where instead you can just maintain your humbleness and realize like, yes, I have gotten a certain amount of education, and now I've done that in order to build up my career, but I don't have to take pride in it, meaning looking down on other people or thinking that I'm more important because of this thing.
So it's like, it's not possible to both be proud of yourself and be humble or like treat others equally.
No, as soon as you have the pride, that's the mind taking pleasure in the fact that you've gotten something that somebody else doesn't have. And now the mind's thinking that I'm better than you. No, and now like, I'm proud.
Just sorry to interrupt, but being proud of yourself doesn't have to like be taking pleasure in others not having it, right?
One moment. I'm going to do something for you to help you. Okay, so the definition of proud, okay, this is what you got to do when you're investigating the teachings of the Buddha. You need to look at definitions, because the way that you're thinking about the word proud and what it actually means is two different things because of impermanence. And as long as you have a lack of wisdom of what the word proud means, then you will think of it in one way while I'm describing it in a different way. So if we keep using the same word, but we have two different definitions, we'll never understand each other. Okay? So the word proud means feeling deep pleasure or satisfaction as a result of one's own achievements, qualities, or possessions, or those of someone with whom one is closely associated, right? So like say your child gets good grades, and now I'm proud of my child, and now I want to put it all over Facebook and show off that my child got good grades or my child got into a good school.
Can I just be proud quietly by myself?
I suggest you let me talk rather than cut me off, because otherwise you're not going to be able to learn, right? So what this is where you're taking this deep pleasure and satisfaction in having accomplished something for yourself, or other people in your life have done that, like your children or something like this, like, wow, look at me, look what I've accomplished, right? Now, here's another part of that. Having or showing a high or excessively high opinion of one's self or one's importance. Okay, so let me read that. Having or showing a high or excessively high opinion of oneself or one's importance. This is putting yourself above people. This is what pride means. This is being proud. And as long as your mind is doing these things that it's describing, your mind is not going to experience enlightenment. Because the first one, the definition is the mind talking about having conditioned feelings, that I am now pleasurable or having satisfaction because of my achievements or qualities or possessions with myself or others. That's what's called a conditioned feeling. That if I get a degree, I'm happy and I feel satisfaction. But if I don't get a degree, I feel sad and I feel guilty. I feel diminished. I feel less of a person. And the other part of it is that one feels as having or showing excessively high opinion of oneself. So the problem with this that's going to happen is if you get happy when you accomplish a certain thing, when you don't accomplish something, you'll feel sad. You'll feel guilty. So you got to see the other side of this. What the Buddha is teaching you is to come to the middle. What the unenlightened mind wants to do is it wants to go to this pleasurable side, and it wants to get all these pleasant feelings when it's accomplishing something in this example. But then the problem that you need to be able to see with that is if you get happy when you accomplish a certain thing, that means in some cases, because of impermanence, you're not going to accomplish your goal. And now your mind's going to swing to the other side where you feel miserable, you feel guilty, you feel withdrawn, you feel diminished, you feel less of a person. So if you allow yourself to get the pride, you're going to end up in the other side. And what you were interrupting me with was, can I do that quietly? And the answer is no, because it's still happening within your own mind. Whether you're doing it externally, where you're showing off in front of other people and putting it on your Facebook page or what have you, yes, that's like an action that you're now taking because of your conceit, because of your pride. But even if you allow this to happen internally within your mind, ultimately you're going to end up in these miserable feelings. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you how to avoid, is how to get to a point where your mind can just always be happy, always be joyful. But as long as you allow pride in the mind's going to swing back and forth, and it's not in the middle. Do you see that? Okay, good.
Thank you so much. And also you look a lot like Bruce Willis.
What's that?
You look a lot like Bruce Willis. Oh,
okay. I've never heard that before. I feel sorry for Bruce Willis. All right. Any other questions? You have a question?
Yeah. So I'm wondering if it's my perception of the world, like that the world in general, society in general, right? Like we're kind of like coached and conditioned to have like this personal existence view of like, oh, I'm this, I'm that, like I'm whatever, right? And there's the conceit as well. And there's the conceit of like, oh, like, yeah, I've got this and I've got that, and like, oh, this person doesn't have this and this person doesn't have that. Is that my perception of the world, my views and perceptions of the world, or is that like truth? Is that the way that the world is? Like, yeah.
Different people are going to have different things in the world. That's the truth because of impermanence. But the moment we allow our mind to get conditioned feelings because we have something that somebody else has, or we don't have something that somebody else has, that's where your mind is experiencing conditioned feelings. It's discontent. The mind is unenlightened, where you need to understand impermanence, that yes, some people are going to have things that are more than you. Some people are going to have things less than you. But when you're judging yourself and measuring and comparing and allowing yourself to get conditioned feelings based on that, that's where your mind is going to have the struggles and difficulties.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Thank you, David. So just a question for my own clarification. So any being that comes into human form will have an ego.
Yes.
To start with. We hopefully dissolve it, but every human being will have an ego.
We don't have it when we're first born, but we have the causes and conditions that are going to create it. Because when we're first born, we don't go into the other nursery like, my hat looks better than your hat, right? Or my mittens look better than your mittens, right? Or my crib is better than yours. We don't think like that as a little baby. But because we have craving, desire, attachment in the mind, and we have ignorance, over time we form that mental object, because you understand what a mental object is. So it forms that mental object. So the conditions are present for us to develop it as we age. And part of what Adrian is talking about is our mind is conditioned this way, right? Sometimes the marketing messages tell us that we should be proud of the car we drive versus what other people drive, or we should be proud to go to this university instead of that university. So society is conditioning the mind. You're allowing it to occur because of your lack of wisdom. The mind's being conditioned to think that pride is something that we should have, right? You're not the only one that's ever thought that way. It's like, what do you mean I can't be proud? I've been taught my whole life to be proud about what I'm doing. Yeah, and that's because you were taught about this unenlightened way. But now you're learning something different that conflicts with the way that we've done things in the past. And now the Buddha is teaching us this better way of life. So if you have the wisdom to understand what the ego is and how detrimental it is to your life, now you can choose to eliminate the ego, and then you'll experience improved results in your day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Marcel?
Test. I just want to ask, why are humans like that? Why we are, when we grow up, why we become like that? What makes it for sense?
We have a lack of wisdom, that unknowing of true reality, that ignorance that you've learned about in other classes, that as long as the mind has that lack of wisdom, that confusion, that misunderstanding, it will continue to have this conditioning. Because of the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, there's craving, desire, attachment. There's this longing, yearning, the mind wanting things to be a certain way. And when it's happy, It's getting what it wants, but when it's sad, it's not getting what it wants. You can think back to when we were children. If our parents gave us chocolate and ice cream, oh, so happy. Oh, that was the best day ever, getting that chocolate and ice cream. And if we got chocolate or ice cream 2 or 3 times in a day, oh my goodness, that was the best day ever, right? But then there came a time when we asked our parents for chocolate or ice cream and they said, no, we can't have it. And you're the worst mommy and daddy ever, right? That's because of our craving. But we perceive the problem as being our parents because of our ignorance, because of our lack of wisdom, because of our confusion and misunderstanding. So these things are in the mind from birth, and then that puts in place the causes and conditions that leads from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. That's where ill will gets formed. The anger and hatred that you and I have been talking about, that's where it gets formed, is through our childhood, through our early adulthood. We have this craving, it leads to the anger, and it's all coming from the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, that is in a lifetime of human. That's how it get established. But what is this all about? I ask myself sometimes, is that a kind of matrix where we all live in, and it's a kind of trainings program where we get all this in our mind that we can get rid of it again? What it is about?
You can think of it that way. We don't come preloaded with this wisdom that the Buddha is teaching, right? The Buddha figured this out on his own. That's one of the things that make a Buddha is they figure out how to get to enlightenment by themselves. And then as they figured it out, they share it with other people. So we don't come preloaded with a bunch of software. We have free will to make whatever choices that we would like to choose to make. And we can choose to cultivate our mind and cultivate wisdom and actually get to enlightenment, or we can choose not to. We can choose to live in the darkness and continue to have difficulties and struggles. But if you're coming to a place like this, I'm going to teach you how to get to this enlightened mental state where your mind can be peaceful and joyful all the time. But it doesn't come preloaded because you have free will to make the choices for yourself. You have a question?
I still have one question about the non-self. You explained it like by dividing a person from its body and the mind. And the body is non-self and the mind is also non-self. But I have a very specific situation that I feel very confused. Like sometimes on the weekends when we believe that we should be happy, but our mind just doesn't allow us to be happy. Like we still feel not so happy. So who is the being that wants us to be happy, and who is the being that prevents us from being happy in this kind of situation?
Okay, so it's not the being that's causing the mind to experience the discontentedness. So what the Buddha describes is there's this body, right? The physical body, the physical structures of the body. Then there's the mind, which is like the consciousness, the awareness. That's where all the thoughts and ideas and those kinds of things, certain wholesome qualities are there, but there's also certain unwholesome qualities in the unenlightened mind. By the time you get to enlightenment, it's nothing but wholesomeness. But by the time you get to, by the mind being unenlightened, there's going to be wholesome and unwholesome things. These two things come together, the body and the mind. And now we refer to that as a person, right? So the person would like the mind to be enlightened, but the mind's like, no, I don't want to. I want to stay over here and be, frolicking in the forest. It's like a wild animal. There's a wild animal in the forest, frolicking around in the forest. The animal trainer comes into the forest and says, hey, I need to train you. And the animal's like, nope, I'm out of here. Bye-bye. See you later. Right? And that's what's happening within your own mind is you've got this body, this mind, they come together. There's this person, and the person's like, come on, mind, like stop being so angry and frustrated. Stop being sad and lonely and bored. And your mind's like, I don't know how. I don't have the wisdom of how to do that. And the person's like, come on, why don't you do that? So you need to train the mind. And that's what you're doing with the teachings of the Buddha, is training it to cultivate wisdom of how to actually get trained. And now with the mind being trained, it can be purified. And now this being, this person, is going to experience nothing but peace and joy, because the mind is like the CPU of the computer. If the CPU of the computer isn't functioning properly, the whole computer doesn't work well, right? So you got to clean up the CPU, which is the mind.
But I understand in this way, it's not like multiple selves commanding us to be different. It's just lack of wisdom that caused that contradiction inside us.
Yes, because of the mind's lack of wisdom, everything else continues to exist in the mind. There is no self, but the mind's going to keep believing that there is one because of its confusion. But when you realize non-self and you eradicate personal existence view, someone could say something positive or negative about this body, and your mind would be unaffected. You might say, oh, thank you so much for your kind words. Like, I didn't say that here when she, I don't know if that was a compliment or not, saying that I look like Bruce Willis. But one of the things you might do is you might say, oh, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. But if somebody says something negative or degrading, you're unaffected by that too. So when she said what she said about Bruce Willis, my mind was just unaffected. It was just still. There was no positive feelings. There was no negative feelings. It was just like, oh, that's funny, right? So you can get to that point where somebody says something about you being Chinese or you being a female or you anything that people might degrade or be disparaging about, you'd be unaffected by it because your mind doesn't identify and hold on to that as who you are. That's what it means to eradicate the personal existence view and realize non-self. That now, because that personal existence view is gone, if you spilled something on your clothing in a social situation, you wouldn't be embarrassed. You'd probably start laughing and be like, oh, look at that. Got all that spaghetti sauce on my clothing. That's interesting. And now you'll just take action of whatever you're going to do. Okay. Got some more questions. Yep. If you guys would like to go.
Yep. Hello. So I understand that nothing is permanent. And sometimes when you feel frustrated and angry with what you are experienced that you cannot control, for example, when you work hard, even harder than any people, then other people, they get the result that is better than you, then how do you... Sometimes it's very common for you to feeling very jealous and feeling like not balanced. So how can I control myself, and how can I, what is the way for me to feel better that for the things that I cannot control?
Okay. So the first thing I'll share is nothing in the material world is permanent. So anything you see, hear, smell, taste that comes in contact with the body or anything that goes through the mind, those things aren't permanent. But there are things that are permanent. Enlightenment, when you attain enlightenment, that's permanent. The natural laws that the Buddha taught, those are actually permanent as well. They're called unconditioned objects. There's conditioned objects that arise, change, and fade away. And then there's unconditioned objects. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. So by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind has been unconditioned. There's no more those conditions of the 10 fetters. So the mind is now purified. So because the mind is unconditioned, it'll experience permanent peace and permanent joy. And the natural laws that the Buddha taught, they don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. So that means that that's the reason why his teachings are timeless, that what he taught 2,500 years ago is just as applicable today as it was 2,500 years ago, because his teachings, the timeless nature of these natural laws, they're unconditioned. They don't arise, change, or fade away. So in a situation where you're jealous or envious, this is not from what we're talking about here, but it could be, there could be conceit and judgment involved. The reason why that's occurring is because there's a craving. Right? There's a longing, there's a yearning. So I'll give you an example. Say that you apply for a job at your work. Say you applied for a promotion. You and some of your coworkers, you're applying for this new position that opened up. Higher salary, better title, nicer office, and all these other kinds of things. Somebody else gets the job instead of you. And now you're jealous or you're envious. In this situation, your mind is having craving. There was a longing, there was a yearning, there was a wanting of that job, thinking that I am important and I should get that job. And now when somebody else gets it, the mind's jealous or envious. So what you need to do to fix jealousy and envy, you need to get rid of that craving, that longing, yearning, where you work towards applying for the job and you're making all the decisions to maybe potentially get the job, but you don't have a longing, yearning for it, basing your feelings on whether you get it or not. So you got to get rid of that craving, desire, attachment, but you also need to arise what's called sympathetic joy. What sympathetic joy is where you have joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. That's what eliminates jealousy and envy. So probably if somebody says, hey, I'm planning on going to Thailand, You're probably like, oh, you're going to have a great time. I was there in 2025. It's so nice. You're going to have great massages and mango and sticky rice. Have a good time. You're not jealous, right? Because you've done it before. You've already had it. But now when someone gets a job that you wanted, you don't get what you wanted, and now the mind might be jealous in that situation. And that's because the mind doesn't have this sympathetic joy, which is joy for others' success. So in this situation with the person going to Thailand, you had joy for their success, but it hasn't been fully cultivated. It hasn't been brought to full perfection and development. So in this situation where someone applies for a job that you don't get, that's where the mind feels frustrated, agitated, or annoyed. So you need to be able to fully cultivate that through training the mind, and the Eightfold Path is going to explain to you how to do that. That takes me about 2.5 hours to teach you that. So I've recorded it many times on our YouTube channel and podcast, so you can learn it through that, in our books as well. Yes, ma'am. If you could turn off that mic too, I think it's got a little feedback on it.
Okay, so today we are talking about personal existence view and also our self-image identity, right? So I'm thinking like, it's actually in our daily life, it's most linked about our confidence level, or so like, how can we get a good balance between like being ego or being like care about our self-image identity and being confident to ourselves?
Yeah, you can have confidence without ego, right? Like you can be confident in what you know and what you're doing and your ability to perform a certain task without thinking of yourself as being above someone, right? So like I'm very confident in sharing the teachings of the Buddha. I know them inside and out, backwards and forwards, but I don't have to go out into the world with my chest puffed up, with a chip on my shoulder, thinking that I'm greater than anybody else, right? I know these teachings better than anybody, blah, 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 right? You don't have to do that. You can just go out into the world, do your work, share the teachings, have confidence to know that you're sharing them and sharing them well and helping people get to enlightenment without bragging about it or being boastful or arrogant within your own mind or even externally with other people. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it seems like you guys are starting to understand what conceit and personal existence view is. And from now on, we're going to be referring to this as the ego, right? This is the ego, this personal existence view and the conceit. So now let me share a little bit more about how it's causing difficulties in your day-to-day life. Ego stands in the way of you being able to see true reality. The way that this works is when you have these pollutions in your mind, these 10 fetters, including the ego, you're going to look out at the world and you're going to see the world through those pollutions, that you're not seeing true reality. You're going to be looking through your own ego at other people, right? So the ego projects unwholesome qualities that you have within your own mind onto other people. And then that reflection that's coming back to you from the mind's going to perceive it as coming from the other person, when in reality it's coming from your own mind. I'll give you an example of this. Okay, say you're in a business meeting and somebody walks in and they're wearing a really nice clothing. They have every hair in exactly the right spot. They look so handsome or so beautiful. They have this wonderful cologne or perfume on. If you guys could check your mics, there's a little bit of feedback. They have this wonderful perfume or cologne on, and they walk into the business meeting and your mind immediately thinks, look at them trying to look so handsome. Look at her trying to appear so beautiful. That's not what's happening at all. The only thing that's happened is somebody walked into the room. That's all that's happened. But because of the mind's ego and your mind wanting to look beautiful around other people, or your mind wanting to look handsome to other people, you've now projected that on that person because that person looks handsome, because that person looks beautiful. When they walk in, your mind perceives it that they're trying to do what you're actually wanting, which is you want to look beautiful to other people. You want to look handsome to other people. And you're perceiving that unwholesome quality as coming from the other person, when in reality it's coming from your own mind. Right? So the mind can project its unwholesome qualities onto other people and now read it as coming from them, when in reality it's coming from your own mind. And now when this person speaks up in the business meeting, you have this harshness and hostility and bitterness towards them, and everyone's looking at you like, whoa, like what's going on here? And you're damaging your ability to perform well in this professional environment. Whereas if you just see true reality, of what's all that's really happened is somebody just walked into the room. That's all that's happened, is someone walked into the room. They're not trying to project anything necessarily. That's coming from your own mind. So if you can see that, it'll really help you in your relationships. What the mind's going to do is it's going to judge other people. It's going to look at other people and it's going to measure and compare them, putting yourself above them or below them. And you're going to need to eliminate this judgment, because as long as you're doing this, it's harming your own mind. So you need to get rid of this judgment of looking at other people. You can actually walk down the street, maybe you see someone's shoes or their jewelry or their hair, and you're like, look at him trying to look this way, or look at her trying to look this way, right? And that's your own mind judging the other person. And instead, you can cut that off and let it go. This is what you'll learn in the Eightfold Path, is that with your mindfulness or your awareness of mind, where you see your mind trying to judge other people, you can cut that off and let it go. Restrain the mind, pull it back. And more, as you're training your mind to do that, eventually you'll get to the point where you're not judging other people. Where you see someone like, oh, wow, she's beautiful, or wow, he's handsome. I'm not looking at you, Marcel. No, just kidding. Wow, he's handsome, right? Or wow, she's beautiful, right? You might think that way, right? But you don't have to put yourself above or below that person, right? And when someone says something like this, you might feel like, he's not telling me I'm handsome. Maybe you're upset or you're frustrated, right? So you can get to the point where you just are completely at ease and you're completely calm, where you don't have to judge other people. And where you see your mind doing that, you'd like to cut that off and let it go. And each time you do that, it's like a wild bush, that this wild bush that is growing, you just keep pushing, cutting it back and cutting it back and cutting it back and cutting it back until eventually you uproot it. And now it won't come back. If you have a weed growing in your yard and you uproot it, it'll never grow again, right? So if you cut this back, this judgment, this conceit, if you cut it back more and more and more and more and more, and eventually uproot it out of your mind, it won't actually be there anymore. The mind will be purified of that conceit. Then there's something called a perception. The mind, because of its ego, it'll cling to a certain perception. What a perception is your views and opinions about the world. And the mind will look out at the world through your own perceptions and clinging to those perceptions of how the world seems to be. So that example that I gave you of that beautiful woman walking into the business meeting, or that handsome man walking into the business meeting, this is the mind clinging to a perception, that your perception is that that person wants to look good in front of other people, when in reality it's your own mind that's wanting to do that. So you need to make sure you're not clinging to a perception. I'll explain to you what perceptions are in this way. When you train to be a police officer, they train you not to cling to your perceptions, because if you cling to your perceptions, you can be making life or death decisions that are unwise. So for example, if I was a police officer and I got a call over the radio that said, hey, there's someone down at the 7-Eleven robbing the 7-Eleven. We need you to go down there and solve this. Of course, they don't talk that way on the radio, but you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like, hey, go down to the 7-Eleven and solve that robbery. Well, if the police officer comes into the 7-Eleven and slings open the door and they see someone in a black hoodie standing over somebody with a gun, and then there's a person on the floor that's bleeding out, if they just pull their gun and start shooting the person in the black hoodie, they might have just made a terrible mistake if they cling to their perception. Because the person with the black hoodie holding the gun could be the cashier. The cashier might have struggled during the time that it took the police officer to get down to the 7-Eleven. They might have had a struggle with the robber, pulled away the gun and actually shot the robber, and it might actually be the robber laying on the floor. So what police officers are trained to do is you go into the store, you pull your gun, and you say, hey, police, put your gun down. And if you're the robber and you turn and you look, you're going to point your gun at the police officer and probably try to shoot the police officer. But if you're the person who's the cashier, it's like, oh my goodness, thank goodness the police are here. And you're going to immediately put down your gun, right? No harm, no foul, right? So that's why police officers are taught not to cling to their perception. Because when you come into a situation, you don't know what actually has transpired because you're just showing up. You can't cling to your perception that just because someone has a black hoodie on and they're holding a gun, that they're the robber. You can't do that, right? So you are not interested in clinging to your perception about anything. You see somebody look a certain way, they wear certain jewelry, they have certain material objects in their life, they speak a certain way in a business meeting. You're not interested in clinging to your perception that this person is a certain way, because it's hindering you from being able to see true reality. That this could be the kindest, most loving person you've ever met, and it could be maybe one of your best friends, or it could be maybe a life partner, that's someone you're going to be with maybe more long term. Whereas if you cling to your perception of how you think this person is, you might hinder yourself from having a really wonderful relationship. So if you cling to your perceptions or you're judging other people, this ego is going to stand in your way of being able to see true reality and have successful, sustaining, satisfying, and fulfilling relationships. You can also project your wholesome qualities onto other people because of the ego. Let's just say that you've chosen that you're going to eat vegan food, plant-based food, and that's what you've been doing now for a few weeks or a few months or a few years. And now your ego thinks, look at me, I'm eating plant-based food, and all those people who eat meat, they're below me. And now I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to project these wholesome qualities that are within my own mind on wanting other people to do these same things and longing, yearning for them to do things my way. And when they don't do things my way, I'm going to look down on them. This is something that the mind could potentially do. This is coming from the mind's ego. So not only can you project your unwholesome qualities on people and read that as coming from them, but the wholesome qualities that you have in your mind and the way that you've cultivated your mind, you can project those out into the world, wanting and longing, yearning and craving for other people to do things your way. Where in reality, you're at a certain point in your life and they're at a certain point in their life, and measuring and comparing that is unwise. It's only going to harm your own mind. So all these wholesome qualities that you do have in your mind, no need to put the expectation on other people that they should be practicing those same things, because everybody needs to come to that wholesomeness on their own, based on their own choices and their own decisions. You having the expectation or the craving that somebody else will do it your way is coming from the mind's ego. So essentially, as you talk about the ego, what you might come to is this conclusion down here, is that the ego serves no purpose. It's not helping you. It's not going to help you in your life, in your professional life, in your personal life. It's just standing in your way of having sustaining, fulfilling, and harmonious relationships and getting to higher and higher positions in your company or your career. Oftentimes we think if we go out into the world and we're boastful and we tell everybody how great we are, that somehow that's going to help us in our career. But in reality, as you're doing that, people are going to push you aside. If you go out there being boastful and arrogant and prideful, in a lot of cases, people are just going to push you aside. They're not going to be interested in being around that. So the ego serves no purpose. By training the mind to be humble and down to earth and seeing everybody as equal and you are equal to everyone else, you'll actually have much better relationships in these kinds of situations. And you won't be judging other people and missing that opportunity to have a really great relationship with that person who you've potentially just judged. So if you get that out of the way, you can be loving and kind with everybody around you. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, now that we've talked about the ego and how it's standing in your way, I'm going to help you to understand how to eliminate it. We still got a microphone on somewhere that's giving us a bunch of feedback. You guys might decide to check your microphones. So there's this personal existence view that we talked about, that clinging to the body and clinging to the mind. As long as the mind's doing that and is confused and thinking that this is who you are, it's going to stand in your way of being able to be peaceful and joyful in all situations, where your mind's going to go into a public setting and now you're going to be embarrassed when you spill something on the body, or you hear somebody talking about the people from the country that you come from, and now you're going to be upset when they say something negative or degrading about that. So there's a meditation that you can learn, which I teach in volume 1, chapter 11. There's a meditation in here, and I teach it in various courses and retreats. It's called Meditation to Realize Non-Self. You wouldn't just jump into doing that right from the very beginning of your journey on the path to enlightenment, but after you've got the Eightfold Path well underway, and you're starting to make progress and you're starting to experience what's referred to as the jhanas. The jhanas are 4 preliminary phases that your mind starts experiencing before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. These are enhanced qualities of mind. There's a meditation that's going to help you to be able to realize non-self. You can also change your language and start disassociating with this mine or my or things like this, because that's what the mind's going to do. You might say, can you hand me my phone? Or this is my son, or my house. The mind's going to hold on and it's going to cling to these kinds of things. But if you can change your language and start speaking in a more true reality way, where you disassociate with these kinds of things, you can disassociate with this body or this mind as being who you are. Because we'll say things like, I am hungry. This is what we'll say with the lack of wisdom. I am hungry. Well, that's actually not true reality, because there is no I here. True reality is the body needs food. So you might think in your mind, the body needs food. And this is going to help you disassociate with this I of this body of being who you are. Or instead of I am thirsty, you might think that the body needs water. Or instead of I have a headache, you might think the head hurts, right? This is the way for you to disassociate with that. Instead of, can you hand me my phone? Can you hand me the phone? Right? So now your mind starts to get rid of that possessiveness of clinging and holding on to these things. And you might notice that, 90, 95, even 98% of the time you can use this, but there's going to be some situations where you can't use it. So if I introduce you to my son, I might say, this is my son, Bailan. But I know he's not mine. He doesn't belong to me. Because true reality would be, this is the being that I contributed sperm to over 12 years ago to create. And you guys would be like, what? What's this guy talking about? I don't know if I'm interested in these teachings or not, right? So about 90, 95, 98% of the time, you can disassociate with this, either talking with other people or even within your own mind. So when I say to someone, and I introduce my son, and I say, this is my son, Bailan, inside my mind, I fully know he's not mine. He doesn't belong to me. He's not my being. He's not mine. He's his own individual being. So you can do that in various situations. You're going to need to develop the perception of impermanence through deep observation in the world. What this means is you need to be able to see in the world that everything is constantly changing. Like when you walk down the street and you see a crack in the sidewalk, this is impermanence. When you see a fence, when the paint's fading, this is impermanence. When you go out into the world and you see it's sunny and then it changes to rain, or you see green leaves in the tree and you see brown leaves on the ground, this is impermanence, because your mind's going to want to cling to this body and it's going to want it to be permanent, or you're going to cling to the self-identity and want it to be permanent. But if you can develop the perception of impermanence internally within the mind, you can understand the universal truth of impermanence, and it'll help you more and more to eliminate this clinging to this body, wanting it to be permanent. Also, the Buddha teaches to wear simple clothing and make your appearance very simple. This is why people will wear the orange robes, or household practitioners might wear all white. This is one way to do it, but there's other ways you can do this too. If you're not interested in going out and buying new clothes or wearing all one color, you can actually take your current clothes and you can stack them up and you can just pick off the top. Because what your mind's going to want to do, because of its personal existence view, is, as I mentioned, you're going to stand in front of your closet. You're going to think, who am I going to see today? How do I want to look? How do I want to appear? And you're going to rifle through all your clothes looking for that special shirt or that special pair of pants. And now your mind's being reinforced with the personal existence view. But if you just stack up your clothing, maybe you have your formal clothes or your informal clothes or whatever it is, your casual clothes, and you just pick off the top, and you don't allow your mind to have a choice about what it's going to wear, over a course of time, your mind will slowly eliminate this personal existence view. But you need to be careful, because what your mind's going to want to do is it's going to want to grab from the middle of the stack. And you know how I know that? Because that's what I did. Because even when I had these white clothes and I stacked them up, there were some of the white clothes that fit me a little bit better than others. And I would be like, I'm going to go see that person today. I want to grab that shirt that fits me a little bit better. Even when all the clothes were exactly the same, essentially. They weren't all exactly the same, because some of them fit a little bit better. And I wanted to grab from the middle of the stack. And that's where you got to know, that's the personal existence view. Let me cut that off. And you need to cut it off and grab from the top, and don't allow the mind to do that. So you can eliminate clothing and jewelry, makeup, scents, facial and head hair. These are all things that the Buddha taught. You might eliminate these for a period of time. Or right now, if you go out in the world with a certain amount of makeup on, you might decide one day to go out with makeup, one day no makeup, one day makeup, one day no makeup. And get comfortable go out into the world without makeup, because the mind's going to want to appear a certain way. And if you always go out into the world with that same makeup, and you can only be comfortable when you go out with that makeup is impermanent. Someday you're not going to be able to go out with that makeup and you're going to feel uncomfortable. So you'd like to put the mind in that situation where some days it goes out with makeup and some days not. Even this jewelry that you wear, whether it's earrings or necklaces or even a watch or a bracelet, if you have it with you, you'll feel comfortable going out into the world. But if you don't have it, you'll feel uncomfortable going out into the world. Even a simple ring or something like this. And all of these things in your life, they are impermanent. So what you like to do is one day wear it, one day not wear it, one day wear it, one day not wear it, or 2 or 3 days don't wear it, then one day wear it. Get comfortable going into the world without these things. And eventually you'll see that your mind is comfortable going out into the world without makeup and without the jewelry and things like this. And whether you choose to wear those things is your choice, but you'll know that your mind has shed this particular aspect of its personal existence view. The Buddha also teaches about eliminating facial hair and head hair. Usually for men, eliminating facial hair is a little bit more challenging. For women, oftentimes eliminating head hair is a little bit more challenging. You don't have to do all of these things in order to eliminate personal existence view. Like you could choose to never cut your hair and still get to enlightenment and still eliminate personal existence view. But in terms of really accelerating your ability to get rid of personal existence view, these are things that are actually really accelerate that, is wearing simple clothing. So whether you choose to do this or not is a choice for you to make, but this is what will help you, is by shaving your hair and by getting rid of your facial hair. But whether you choose to do that or not is up to you. And if you did choose to eliminate your head hair and you have a lot of hair, what I would suggest you do is maybe do it gradually, where you maybe cut it back slowly but surely, where you do it in stages, where maybe you like wear it for a few months, kind of a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter. And each, 2, 3, 4 months, you're just kind of moving it less and less, because your mind's going to need to adjust. And so are the people around you, because you probably have certain people around you that are attached to your hair, right? And you might notice that they become discontent when you actually are shaving your hair. So whether you choose to do these kinds of things or not, totally up to you, but it will help you to eliminate this personal existence view. You're going to need to cut off and let go of any arising interest to project the self-image or self-identity. When you go out into the world and you see that coming up in the mind with your mindfulness, you're going to need to cut that off and let that go. And then you'd like to seek guidance with the teacher over multiple sessions, because you're going to have different conflicts within your own mind and in your day-to-day life where this personal existence view is coming up, and you're going to need to reach out to somebody who understands it and can give you advice of how to help you. So do you guys have any questions on how to eliminate personal existence view? No? Okay. Let me just check online here. All right. I don't see anything online. Hello to all you guys and girls. Nice to see you this morning. All right. So now let's talk about conceit. The way to eliminate... Oh. Can you just go back to the last slide? This one or the one before? Up here? Okay. No worries. It's all right. Yeah, you'll think about it later. Okay, so conceit is the second aspect of the ego. That's that arrogance, the pride, the boastfulness, putting yourself above people or below people. The way you can eliminate that is you can do things like using phrases like thank you or sorry, speaking politely in terms of using sir or ma'am. The word or the phrase I don't know is very good for your ego, because the ego is not going to want to say that. The ego is not going to want to say I don't know, because the ego wants everybody to think I'm so smart, I'm so intelligent. So you'll have difficulty saying I don't know. So if you can use phrases like this occasionally, this is going to really help you. In situations where you don't know something, just say I don't know. But you know what? I bet Google knows. Why don't we check Google, right? Or I know, how about this guy? This person might know, or this girl, she might know. Let's talk with them. And then you get to learn something, and so do they, right? So Be comfortable with saying, I don't know. This is the thing that helps you with conceit a lot, is sleeping in a low position. I know this might sound strange for people who aren't familiar with Asian culture, but sleeping on the floor is actually really, really helpful for your mind. Here in Thailand, it's actually challenging to find a bed that is higher than your knee, right? Most beds are like knee height or below. But oftentimes, if you look at cultures where there's a lot of ego, if you look at where the people sleep, they typically are sleeping in high, luxurious positions, and you're going to see a lot of ego in that culture, right? So if you set up your bed to be down on the floor, it's like all of like a 3-minute thing, and it's going to reap rewards for you over and over and over and over again. Going down into your bed, getting up out of your bed each day, each time you have to go to the bathroom and things like this, it'll train your mind to empty out some of that ego. So you can set that up once and it's done and it's over with. So sleeping in a low position is wonderful for the mind. If there are certain tasks that you think are beneath you, you would like to do those tasks. Like say you think like, cleaning a toilet, that's below me, I would never do that. Or washing dishes, that's below me, I would never do that. You would like to do those things. Put your mind in that situation. Get down on your hands and knees and scrub the floor, right? This is really good for your mind. And I know you guys might think like, this kind of sounds a little bit strange to do those kinds of things, but this is what the mind needs to be transformed. It almost gets rewired when you're doing these kinds of things, because your mind will think that you're above people. And now when you go down on your hands and knees to scrub the floor, it actually is humbling the mind, right? And then you can listen to other people teach you wisdom without an interest to teach them anything, right? You're kind of doing that here. But you also would like to do it in other places too. Because with the mind's ego, you'll be in a social situation with your friends and they'll be talking about something or teaching something to the group, and your ego will want to come over the top of them and be like, oh, you went there? Well, I went over here and I did this and I did that. The mind's going to want to come over the top of your friends and the people around you that are talking. So you need to be observant of that. And if you can put yourself in situations where you can just listen to people speaking and sharing wisdom, and you don't have an interest to teach that person anything, that's going to really be helpful for your ego. Also, washing people's feet. This is something that happens a lot here in Thailand. We have something called Dam Hua. This happens like on New Year's Day, on Mother's Day, Father's Day, maybe on your birthday. You might go to your parents and actually wash their feet. This is a way of showing respect and gratitude and politeness to them and appreciation, but it's also a way to help you to eliminate your ego. You might notice if you go do this, the first couple times you might actually be shaking. This is the body shaking because the mind's shaking. It doesn't feel comfortable in that situation. So typically you might wash your parents' feet, your grandparents' feet, maybe older brothers or sisters. This is common. Even teachers, sometimes students have a certain amount of wisdom that they learn from a teacher and they might choose to wash their teacher's feet. There's a lot of respect for teachers here in Thailand because they understand the value of wisdom in Thailand, and teachers are the ones who are sharing that. So the Thai people really respect people who are sharing wisdom. So if you wash people's feet, this is really helpful. And there's been different times that I've taught this, and it's even in the book as well. You can show respect to people by whying them. This is one of the reasons why the Thai people do this. They why people and bow their head. Or if you notice, like when the Thai people walk in front of you, they will kind of lower their head as they're walking past you. This is a way of showing humbleness. If you go around 15, 20, 30 times a day whying people, this is going to really humble your mind. In situations where you're not doing that, it kind of projects arrogance and ego. So you'd like to really humble the mind. And I know this isn't maybe from your culture that you do this, but if you start getting in the habit of this, this will really humble your mind. Even when I used to ride the motorbike and I used to go out of the gate of my village, there's people there standing that are like opening the gate and stuff like this, and I will bow my head. I can't bring my hands together to why them, but I will bow my head as I go through. And even now, I started driving a car recently and they open up the gate for me. And in Thailand, if you salute someone, this is a phrase we call kapom. This is like a way of showing a lot of respect to someone. So I will salute the security guards as I'm going out of the gate. This is a way of humbling the mind. So this is really helpful for you in situations to do that. You're not putting yourself below someone. choosing to respect someone doesn't mean that you're putting yourself below someone. That's sometimes what people think. They're like, if I respect you, that means I'm putting myself below you. No, that's not the case. You can think of yourself as being equal to people and still respecting them. You don't have to put yourself in a diminishing, lower position in order to respect someone. And in fact, sometimes what we're taught is don't respect others until they respect you first. Well, if everybody practiced this, nobody would be respecting anybody, because everybody would sit back and be like, I'm not respecting you until you respect me. Well, I'm not respecting you until you respect me. Well, in that case, nobody's respecting anybody. So an enlightened being, they're not a follower. They don't follow and conform to what other people do. So you're going to need to break through that wall and choose to be respectful, and do that in a humble way where you don't think of that as putting yourself below somebody. Being respectful to others is actually showing that you have wisdom in your mind, and you know that it's wise to be respectful of all the people around you. You can respect everybody and anybody in life. Practicing generosity, loving kindness, and compassion can help eliminate the ego. Generosity is where you're giving and sharing more than is strictly required without any expectation of anything in return. Loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. This will also help to produce humbleness in the mind. Anytime you see the mind being judgmental, where it's trying to compare yourself to others and put yourself above or below people, you would like to eliminate that. Cut that off. Be polite and gentle and kind to people because you know it's the right thing to do, not because you want something from them. You can ask others advice and what they've learned in life, and just listen without trying to prove anything to them. Sometimes that's what the mind does, is you go out in the world trying to convince others or prove to others what you have or haven't done in the world. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. An enlightened being, when they walk down the street, they just walk down the street with wisdom and a smile. They're not walking out trying to convince people of anything. One of the best ways to know someone isn't enlightened is they're going to come up to you and tell you that they're enlightened, right? If someone's like, hey, by the way, guess what? I'm enlightened, right? It's like, you know right away they're not enlightened because they're being arrogant and prideful, right? They're being boastful, right? So you can just walk down the street with wisdom and a smile. You don't need to go out and convince other people of what you've accomplished in life. Just know for yourself what you've accomplished and continue to work towards those things. You can help others without any expectation of anything in return in terms of any kind of favor or positive benefit for yourself. You can seek guidance from teachers, which is going to help you to admit that you don't know things in the world. Like getting to enlightenment, you're going to need help from teachers and guides. You're not going to be able to do this by yourself. There's only one person who can do it by themselves, and that's an actual Buddha. That's one of the criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. So coming to a temple like this and learning from a teacher, you're kind of admitting to yourself, like, yeah, you don't know how to get to enlightenment, and this is really helpful to your mind. You can cut off and let go of any kind of projection of arrogance, pride, judgment, measuring or comparing. As soon as you see your mind having that pride or wanting to boast on social media about all your accomplishments, you can restrain your mind and choose not to do that. And then over multiple sessions, seek guidance from a teacher of more and more things of how to humble the mind. But this is a good starting point. And I've got these all in chapter 16, so they're right there documented for you guys. Do you guys have any questions on any of this stuff? Steve? Yep. And ma'am?
Thank you, David. I think I asked this question last year when we did have another go at it in a different way. Is that ego serves no purpose. Mm-hmm. Just as an aside, when I was growing up in Australia in the 1970s, there was a rock song on the radio and its title was "Ego is not a dirty word." It became number one. Interesting. But so we established before that any being that manifests in human form has craving, desire, attachment, and being in this realm, it's going to manifest that in the development of an ego. Mm-hmm. So I can't get to enlightenment without dissolving the ego. Mm-hmm. But isn't that the purpose of the ego? Is to be dissolved.
No. If we didn't have ego, that's the natural mind. That's that natural state. So we don't have to have ego in order for it to be dissolved. But because the mind does have ego, it does need to be dissolved. It does need to be eliminated. So it doesn't serve any purpose. And that's why we can get rid of it. Whereas if it served a purpose, we wouldn't be able to get rid of it. Sometimes you'll hear people say, you can't live life without an ego. And this is because they're not necessarily understanding what ego is 100%, and they don't understand the detrimental things that they're experiencing because of it. But sometimes people say it's physically impossible to exist in the world without an ego. But this isn't actually true, because otherwise you would never be able to get to enlightenment. So understanding that you can eliminate it automatically helps you to see that there is no purpose, because if there was a real purpose for it, then you wouldn't be able to eliminate it, and you would have to have it in order to survive. But that's not the case.
Yeah, thank you. You're just getting hung up on the words. I get it. Yeah. It's got no purpose, therefore dissolve it. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Like this, I don't know, there's certain things in your life probably that don't serve no purpose, like alcohol and drugs. Right? It serves no purpose for you. It's going to get you drunk. It's going to get you intoxicated. You're going to make unwise decisions, so you get rid of it. It has no purpose in your life anymore. Same thing with the ego. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think you have a question, right?
David, my question is around compassion and loving kindness. There's a lot that you could go into there, I'm sure, but I found it to be one of the most helpful tools for me in beginning to dissolve the ego. I just wondered whether you could give some more insight into how you could go about cultivating this. I know there's chanting and meditation, but in terms of day-to-day, when you come across situations where, the ego feels like it's controlling, I guess, what could you suggest in terms of navigating those situations?
Sure. There's a meditation that I teach called loving kindness meditation, and the Buddha taught this, and you would like to do this each morning, every single morning. It's really helpful because you go out into the world with loving kindness in your mind. It's kind of like filling up your gas tank when you do this meditation, and then you learn through the Eightfold Path, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood. If you haven't studied that yet, you'll need to see that in the words of the Buddha, where he's teaching you how to function in a more loving and kind way through the way that you interact with people in your intention, speech, and actions. So there's ways like you can speak with gentleness. You can speak with this loving kindness. What loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Active goodwill, where you're disinterested in harming other beings. So that would be your loving kindness, but you need that meditation to build it up, and then go out into the world and be loving and kind with people. And practicing generosity can help bring up some of that loving kindness. And then compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. And all of these things are mental states. It's not necessarily an action. Generosity, the loving kindness, and the compassion, it's all a mental state. So you can have the concern for the misfortune of others, and whether you choose to do something or not, it's a personal choice based on the variables at the time. So if you're walking down the street and you see a person who's homeless, you might decide to provide them some water or food or something like that. That would be generosity. That would be loving kindness, and that would be compassion. That would be coming from your mind's qualities, and now you're practicing that. But in all situations, you're not going to necessarily be able to give them water and food. You might be on your way to an important business meeting and you're already late and you have to hurry up and get to this business meeting, but you can still maintain the mental state of compassion. So maintaining these mental states of loving kindness and compassion, it doesn't mean that you're going to have a certain particular action in every situation, because that would be permanence, but you can at least maintain that mental state through cultivating your mind and meditation, and then going out into the world and practicing it in your day-to-day life. And wherever you see with your mindfulness or awareness of mind that you're doing the opposite of loving kindness or compassion, you can cut off that unwholesome quality and arise the wholesome. So the opposite of loving kindness would be anger, hatred, ill will, frustration, agitation, annoyance, even dislike. If someone dislikes another person, that's coming from your own expectations, that you want this person to be a certain way. And if they meet your expectations, you like them. And if they don't meet your expectations, you dislike them. So wherever you see your mind doing those kinds of things, like anger, hatred, ill will, frustration, irritation, annoyance, or dislike, you would like to see that with your mindfulness, cut that off and let it go, and then bring up this loving kindness where you have a genuine interest in seeing this being be well. And then you can do the same thing with your compassion, where you see your mind doing the opposite of that, which would be like indifference, where you could care less about how other people are. Or the other side of that would be like worried or anxious, having anxiety about the world. Those are two opposite sides of compassion, where the mind's worried and having anxiety about the world, or you're indifferent about the world. You would like to bring the mind to the middle, where there's concern for the misfortune of others. So where you see your mind on either side of that, you cut that off and let it go, and then bring in the compassion. And then as you do this each day through your meditations and through going out into the world and practicing, eventually you'll get to the point where these qualities are permeating in the mind, and they're just always there. They're just always accessible. And then whether you choose to take action upon it is going to be unique in each individual situation. Any other questions on any of this stuff? Okay, so what I'm going to do is share this last thing with you guys. This is what I suggest you do. As you're working on the ego, it's going to take you multiple months and years to eliminate the ego. It's not going to be a couple of day thing. It's not going to be a couple of week thing. It's a gradual wearing away over multiple months and multiple years. And ultimately, you will get to a point where the ego is completely eliminated, because it'll be 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. You won't see yourself measuring and comparing people. You're not going to be judging people. You're not going to be looking down on people. You're going to see your relationships are really blossoming because of this and other things that you're working on as well. But even when your ego's gone, I suggest that you always and forever develop your practice to eliminate your ego, never convincing yourself that it's actually been eliminated, never assuming that it's been extinguished. Because the moment that you think that the ego is extinguished, that's when it's going to come back in, and it's going to show you like, it hasn't been extinguished yet. Because your ego is going to constantly try to convince you that you're more enlightened than you really are. And now the ego gets to stick around. It's kind of like a bad tenant. That you have this tenant that move into your house, you're the landlord, it doesn't pay you any rent, and then you show up every once in a while and say, hey, I need you to pay rent. And like, oh, okay, don't worry, I'll pay you rent next week. It's going to come next week. I'm going to pay you. And you're like, okay, and you go away and you don't pay attention to it, right? And now this bad tenant is just sticking around for longer and longer and longer. So if you assume that the ego has been eliminated, when it rises its head, you're going to miss it and you're not going to see it. One of the ways you might think about it, if you guys know that game Whack-A-Mole, where the moles pop up and you have that mallet and you're popping their heads and they go back down. Well, if you stand there with your mallet and you think game's over, but you didn't see that game's over and one of them pop up their head, you're going to miss it. You're not going to be able to hit that whack-a-mole, right? So if you never convince yourself that the game is over and you just stay vigilant and determined and dedicated and diligent with your whack-a-mole, with your mallet, as soon as it pops its head up, you can pop it down, right? So if you do that with the ego, where you never assume that it's gone and just always be vigilant, then when it does pop up its head, you'll be able to take action on it. Because you'll go 3 months, 6 months where you haven't seen any ego. And if you convince yourself that the ego is gone in the 7th or 8th month when it rises up its head, you'll miss it. And your mind will be arrogant and prideful. So just never assume that it's actually gone. And this will actually work really, really well for you. Okay, so I'm going to end class here by just thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for the wonderful discussion. Thank you for your questions and your interest to learn. If you guys would like to learn more, you're more than welcome. We have classes here on Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and I live stream them from here. So no matter where you are in the world, you can attend live. And I also do this at 9 p.m. from my home. So even if you're in a time zone like right now, Europe is sleeping, but when they wake up, they can attend the 9 p.m. class. I'll do the same class at home film without a live audience, just from my home studio. And then if you can't attend the live classes, they're recorded. So on YouTube, on Facebook, on our podcast, you can digest this content at your own pace as well. You can get the books, the audiobooks, the videos, podcasts, personal guidance, and all these things. So if you're looking to heal from what hurt you and eliminate these discontent feelings, there's help here for you. But what's hurting you is within your own mind, and you're going to need that guidance to help you, and you're going to need resources to help you. So feel free to reach out to me, and I'm here to help you. Whatever you choose to do today, have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee krap, sawadee krap, sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.